What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Inside Bitcoin Spaces with Jason and Andrew.
What's up, Jason?
What's up? Today is Friday, July 17th, 2026. Bitcoin block height 958,427. Bitcoin USD price 62,968 US pieces of paper. Andrew, welcome in. How you doing today?
I'm doing fine. Jason, how you doing yourself?
Doing great, doing great. So Bitcoin price sitting at 62,000. We went down to 59,000 up to about 64,000, and we're chopping around 62 now.
Yeah, I hear people kind of like, I don't know if you could call it breathing a slight sigh of relief or something, but it seems that we're kind of like off that like mental bottom level. And, there's still like, oh, is the 4-year cycle still, active or no, or what's going on? I saw something, I don't have it handy, but there was one of these new financial news interview shows that had Larry Fink. He was talking about Bitcoin and kind of as part of something else that was asked of him. And he was like, oh, actually Bitcoin's not as, now that it's kind of stabilizing, it's less volatile. It's like, institutions are getting more and more interested in it and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, now we can kind of like, and he's not like saying, oh, well, the fact that it's down from its all-time high, he didn't seem to care about it. He was like more focused on, oh yeah, now that it's kind of showing to be more stabilized, then, people that are kind of averse to the volatility are going to be like, oh, well, now I can kind of come in and now I can get interested in it. It's like, it's a thing now, and he was talking about it being a component of other types of products and stuff, and that was going to lend to more stabilization. So we'll see. But he's a big voice in the TradFi world, so when he says something, people listen. So
yeah, I think the whole stabilization theory, it's a little misguided, because I don't think we're ever going to stabilize against the dollar, because the dollar is going to be printed digitally in increasing amounts over time. So it's going to be even more. So the volatility is going to be even higher. What I think we will stabilize, though, is when Bitcoin becomes a unit of account and it stabilizes against the price that we buy things with.
Yeah, it's funny when you think about it, the whole term stable, and the fact that it's applied to this like whole class of cryptos, stable coins, right? You say, oh, it's stable because it's pegged against the US dollar and it doesn't fluctuate in relation to the US dollar. But when you say that, most people like totally look past like, well, but the dollar isn't stable.
Right.
So it's like, why call it stable? Yes, it's stable depending on your viewpoint of what you're comparing it against, right? So it's like, yeah, it's stable against something else that's not stable. So yeah, it's like, okay, we can mince words, but it's kind of funny that we use this nomenclature to refer to something in a way that it really isn't if you compare it to like other things, right? There's been some kind of, I've seen more people recently kind of using the metaphors like, oh, the price of a house in Bitcoin has gone down, a lot. Well, okay, yeah, it has. The price of a house has gone up in dollar terms a lot. And, so it's like, if we were used to referring to everything in price of house as the measure, then yeah, the dollar isn't stable at all. So
Exactly.
It's like, yeah, so it's like and this is a thing that people, it's hard to get your head around, and that it's how we frame things is a big part of how we perceive things. I actually at one point was looking online on eBay. I'm like, I'm sure somebody somewhere has like for some sort of like high school teaching, need, like made a like a rubber ruler, like a normal looking ruler, but made it out of like rubber so that you could kind of like stretch it or compress it,
Mm.
just in order to kind of like illustrate, hey, it's hard to like build a house when everybody's using rubber rulers, and there's like, oh yeah, it's that's this is a 2x4. Well, it's not quite. And it's like, if everybody working on a house is using a different standard, then it's going to be hard to coordinate building anything. But I couldn't find anybody who's ever created a rubber ruler.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
I just thought it should exist, probably some in some esoteric way. It should exist, but I didn't find it. Maybe I should make one. I don't know.
Yeah, it's a good idea. So, how familiar are you with the power law? Because this is one of the gripes I have with the power law, and they associate Bitcoin with the power law, and they say it's going to steadily go up 30%, 20% a year, diminishing returns, all these things. I don't like that law because the comparison is against the dollar. So we have Bitcoin, and we're pegging it or pairing it versus the dollar, when we all know that the dollar is created for free in unlimited amounts. And if we want to sustain the system that we have, we know that the dollar will be increasingly created in even higher amounts over time. You can look back in time. They created a million, a billion. It seemed like a lot at the time. Then you look back, it's nothing. And we're creating trillions. And then at the time, it seemed like a lot. Then in the future, it's nothing. And that just keeps snowballing and escalating more and more.
Yeah. You look at these different ways of economically analyzing things. And, I'm not a chartist, one of these people that, watches the chart and tries to find patterns and stuff. I'm more of the belief in the macro kind of effect. And also, you just can't, like break apart the fact that the market is a bunch of humans like making decisions. So it's like the psychology and like just the kind of biases that are built into us are really largely at play, right? The recency bias, like, oh, the fact that it's like it keeps going up, so it must keep going up. Or the sunk cost bias, like, oh, I bought at this price, so I can't sell until it reaches that price, right? So we got all these things that kind of play into it. And the economic analysis side of this is like they're always trying to kind of distill in with mathematics these different sort of behavioral things. I don't know. It's like kind of if you zoom out kind of perspective, it's like all this stuff, like you could take the stance a lot of true Bitcoiners do. It's like, it's all got to fail. It's all got to go to zero. It's all got to collapse in a major way. And it's got to be replaced by something else. We largely think Bitcoin is that something else, but I was even talking to a fellow who on Wednesday that really thinks deeply about this stuff. And we were like, maybe Bitcoin's kind of a stepping stone on a new sort of thought process around money and what's an ideal like market system in general. It's like we kind of get stuck in that, oh, it's the end state. Like, and maybe it's not the end state, but maybe it's a critical intermediate state. So who knows? I mean, when you're changing your thought process around a new topic, and you're changing how you think about something, it's very difficult. And somebody I was hearing, it's like, there's like, yeah, well, it'll take 3 generations before people really understand Bitcoin. It's like, whoa, when you think about it, that's kind of crazy to think about. You mean it won't be generally understood by the general populace until like I'm dead and gone for a long time? It's like, we want it all to happen in our lifetime so we can like experience the benefit that we expect from it. So anyway.
Yeah, Bitcoin's going to be around for a long time, hopefully, and it's going to take a long time for people to understand it. That definitely makes sense. That's one of the reasons why I'm so hesitant to make changes to Bitcoin. You know, I don't want consensus changes, things like that. And we have the new Bitcoin proposal, BIP-110, coming up, which wants to limit op return data, 83 bytes, reduce some taproot things. I think op if, there's a list of things that it does. I'm a little hesitant on the BIP-110 change because I don't like changing Bitcoin in general. Another big concern is there's one maintainer that this BIP has, if the knots implementation, but there could be a positive to BIP-110, and that is for Spaces Protocol. So Spaces Protocol is naming on Bitcoin, and it fits right in with BIP-110 and Core. It's below all the limits that BIP-110 and the knots are trying to implement with the reduced data temporary soft fork. So what do you think about BIP-110 and how it could impact Spaces Protocol for the better?
You know, I've been thinking about this as well. The particulars of BIP-110, for those that aren't into it, I mean, it's tough to get into all of them, but the the initial sort of argument for it was to, it's like, look, if we allow too much data on the chain over time, it's going to make running your own node harder and harder because the storage requirements will grow and grow, maybe a lot faster than we want them to.
But is that even true though? Because the block size hasn't increased.
Well, true, but not every block is completely filled either.
Okay.
So there's that. And if you come in with a large transaction with a lot of data associated with it and or willing to pay for that data to be included in the next block, then you, by the very definition of how it works, you push everybody else's transaction further down, you know, the mempool, to where they won't get into a block maybe until later, maybe much later. Maybe you could find your transaction like languishing in the mempool for, you know, who knows, a day. And if there was an increased amount of activity where that was maybe popular for a while, that would, you know, everybody would want to do it. And so there would be all this demand for putting large data sets on the blockchain, and that would crowd out everybody else. And because that's, from a lot of people's perspective, that's a non-monetary use of the blockchain, then it shouldn't be allowed. And so this BIP-110 is a proposal like, how would we create a change to the rules, this consensus rules, that now would prevent that. So it's not that, because right now you can do that, and with the change and the whole like change in Bitcoin Core implementation to version 30, where the team kind of unilaterally, well, I guess you could debate that, but it seems kind of unilaterally decided to like lift the op return data size limit, then that caused contention. Effectively, this was a reaction to it.
Which was probably a mistake. Which was probably a
Yeah,
mistake by
well,
Core.
you know, I think things could have been handled better. I think that's a whole nother discussion. But the end of it is that, okay, so there's this proposal, but the proposal now introduces, there's now a decider. There's like, what is not allowed versus what is allowed is now kind of open to more influences. And that in itself is a kind of perversion of the core premise of Bitcoin in itself. And there's theories, some people are talking about, it may make some existing coins unspendable for the temporary period of the soft fork proposal, which is kind of a non-starter for anyone who really believes in what Bitcoin is. It's like, wait a second, you can't like prevent people from spending money that they already possess, that they have possession of, they own the keys. It's like, that's just wrong.
Now, is that multi-sig that it might interfere with?
It was, I think it's with some early versions of early coin sort of scenarios. I don't remember the particulars, but Saylor came out with some statements, kind of saying that was kind of a big part of why he didn't like it. And Adam Back was kind of chiming in also this week that, and I think his main point is like, look, Bitcoin was designed so that market forces of like the fact that you would increase fees and have to pay a big fee in order to put a big chunk of data on the blockchain. Nothing comes for free. So the market effect that already exists in Bitcoin should be plenty to curtail any large, abuses. And I mean, I think the arguments that I kind of started with that, well, it's hard to maintain a node if the data storage size keeps growing and growing. True, but like we have Moore's law too, which is going the other way, right? It's just like I can get like a 4 terabyte SSD for like under $100. It's like that's crazy. I mean, when
Well,
you think about it.
maybe HDD, a hard drive. I don't know about an SSD.
Okay, well, so it's like, but you know how Moore's law works, right? It's
Yeah.
like, yeah, I don't even watch prices until I actually need something because it's like changing all the time. And I know there's been recent chip shortages, so maybe the kind of dynamics a little bit out of whack right now. But by and large, it's like, and the whole IPFS interplanetary file system is based on the premise that, you pay for something today, but the cost to store it into the future will get cheaper and cheaper. So anyway, I don't think that's a strong argument that, we won't be able to run nodes there and that the number of nodes that are validating the network will drop off because the storage requirements, I mean, people buy more and more and more storage all the time. So yeah, I think it's a weak argument. I think it's like, let the market forces decide. When I was thinking about this and like how it might impact Spaces protocol, I'm like, my first thought is that, it probably would be negative because here we have a bunch of very loud people talking about, oh, CSAM and you can't bloat the blockchain and it's outside the original ethos of what the Bitcoin blockchain was supposed to be. And like, isn't this terrible? And, we're going to fix it all for the betterment of society and blah, 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 blah. And it's like, these are always hard arguments because like, well, wait, well, who decides what's bad? And, shouldn't we have like freedom of expression and speech? I mean, isn't that a core value too? Doesn't that get impinged here? And that's, I think, another part of it. But so my thought is like, why launch something that is using Bitcoin for a non-monetary use just so that the opponent, the proponents of BIP-110 will say, see, look, here's something just like what we're talking about, a whole naming system that uses the blockchain as its anchoring, and it's wasteful and it's bad use. And they could say that, and a lot of people who just like understand a superficial like understanding of the topic might say, yeah, I agree with that. That's bad use. We shouldn't have like monkey pictures on Bitcoin. We shouldn't have like, non-monetary. Oh, but the first block, Genesis block, actually has non-monetary data on it. That's right. Oh, well. But anyway, and now we've got, I think the Constitution's on there somewhere. The whole BIP-110 proposal is embedded on there. So it's like, there's a lot of hypocrisy. And then, but I think my thought was like, well, people wouldn't go educate themselves into the particulars of the argument. They would just take whatever somebody said, bad, space is bad, space is good, whatever. But if you look, and that's just going to sway public opinion. But if you look into the details of it, you find out that the BIP-110 proposal is kind of got a lot of hypocrisy in it. Not only is like a few people trying to drive and force this adoption, this change, very vocal people, but still, it's like, it's not like that they said, okay, if you're going to have the statement non-monetary use, then the place where this stuff is stored in the part of the transaction called the op return is like, okay, then that should be zero, right? You should have no ability to put anything in there. And one of the things that I've built in some of my stuff is like sometimes when you make a payment, it's like it's nice to have like an invoice number that you put into the payment data so that you can say this payment went towards fulfilling this invoice. And so technically, just a few characters of invoice data, like this would be very handy because that allows you to, like, if you come across a transaction and say, well, what was this for? You could look at the data and say, oh, it's for this particular invoice. So that's pretty handy. But technically, that's non-monetary data, right? So you're saying I can't do that? That's super easy use case to think about. But the hypocritical sort of thing about the BIP-110 advocates is like they didn't say zero. They said the old way. Well, the old way was the data limit before, which was up to 83 bytes in the op return. And if you impress on people, hey, it's not zero, it's 83 or less, then you can't hold up Spaces protocol as a violation of that sort of ethos because Spaces protocol operates completely within not only Spaces protocol, open timestamps, other things like operate completely within the 83 byte limit that was established before the Bitcoin Core version 30 rolled out, where they expanded the limit. So it's like you're not really saying no monetary use. You're just saying no large monetary use, non-monetary use, which is like, be honest about what you're asking for. And that's always glossed over. So, but again, most people aren't going to dive into the particulars of the argument. They're just going to like go with their whatever their emotional sort of reaction is to it.
People are tribal.
People are tribal. And this is how we live, right?
Yeah, people are tribal, and it tends to go, especially now with the internet and everything, it goes to the extreme. So it's like no data, rug the spammers. It's like, whoa, I could see like, yeah, we don't want all this crazy data on Bitcoin, but rugging UTXOs, that's super extreme. I don't want to rug any UTXOs for any reason, because then once you start doing that, any reason's good enough. You can make a moral justification to rug any UTXO. So we don't want to rug UTXOs, in my opinion. But the reason why I think BIP-110 could be good for Spaces protocol is because Spaces protocol operates well within the 83 byte limit of op return. You can put hundreds of millions of names in a tiny 32 byte commit on Bitcoin. So Spaces protocol is going to be good whether we fork off with BIP-110, we don't fork Core, whether it's not a hard fork, it's just a soft fork, and all the nodes and miners take up for 110, and that just becomes the longest chain. Spaces protocol is going to be good. But what it could also do is invalidate any potential competitors for Spaces protocol. Let's say there's competitors that are naming systems or some sort of something else system that competes with Spaces protocol that's using over 83 bytes. And if BIP-110 goes in, well, none of those are valid. So it could potentially be good for Spaces protocol here.
Yeah, I agree that that's potentially, but these technical moats that you try to build around a project or a company or whatever, are they're weaker in justifications in my mind. In a way, we should, as a free society, free market, welcome competition. We should welcome speech in whatever form, even speech we disagree with. We should welcome competition, even competition that might take away our market or our thunder or our whatever space in the minds of everyone else. I mean, there have been other naming systems before, even on Bitcoin, that have failed and not, succeeded due to, whatever the trade-offs that they chose to implement. And that's that's fine. I mean, this is part of like, the ecosystem. And maybe Spaces protocol isn't the end all. Maybe it becomes a stepping stone to the absolute best situation in the future. We don't know, but currently this is, you know, I feel our best sort of shot at like, building a system that is, you know, uh, made the right trade-offs and balance. A lot of that is like just the fact that it takes time. It takes
Yeah.
time to get a lot of stuff done. You can't just like introduce a bunch of new names, all suddenly there's like a gating of how many new names per day can get introduced into the bidding process. The length of time of the bidding process, the fact that it can go on in perpetuity if you've got two people contending for that particular name. The fact that uh, if there's no activity on a good name and it expires after a year, it becomes available again. All these things are really long windows. We'll probably get into this, what cert relay and commitments. It's like the fact that you need to wait 150 blocks, which is over a day, before a commitment that was placed on the blockchain is considered, fully finalized. Um, so yeah, one thing, Spaces is not fast. that is definitely for sure, and it's not fast for a reason. And that's, I think we should celebrate its not fastness, more than consider it a negative. So anyway,
Yeah, I think it speaks to the strength of Spaces protocol, how well it's designed that it can make both camps happy. Core camp, it can fit in that. It can fit in the BIP-110 camp because it is a concession that data is valuable on Bitcoin. Otherwise, BIP-110 would say 0, like you said, but it doesn't. It says 83 bytes. So there are valuable things that you can store on Bitcoin. Even the BIP-110ers agree. It just went crazy extremes where people were putting, crazy pictures and videos, and then the other side's like nothing at all. But really, in the middle is the sweet spot and where you want to be. All right, so you brought up cert relay. You want to talk about cert relay now?
we can. Let's touch on this thing I ran across, this X post
Okay.
first. Let's get that one done because I think it's just an example, something I came across today. I'm like, oh, I'm always looking for examples of where Spaces protocol could potentially like have solved an issue that is that we're now experiencing with the existing DNS system, right? So again, I mean, we've talked about this. One of the challenges as a community that we're going to face is that how do you explain to people that they need something that to fix something that's perceivably not broken?
Yeah.
it's like I can go and type in my browser location .com website name or dot whatever, and I'll get to it every time. It just works. Why should we be spending all this time and energy and effort replacing something functionally that doesn't work?
Why do I need
And
Bitcoin? My bank account
why do you
works.
need Bitcoin? Why do you need Bitcoin? Money works. I can go to the bank. I can go today. I can like after this call, I can get in my car, I can go to my bank, and I can like withdraw money from my savings account. What's the problem? I can pull out my credit card and go to the grocery store and get groceries. What's the problem? I can like buy something online. I can send people money with Zelle and Venmo and stuff. I mean, what's the problem? Why do we need Bitcoin? Well, and to a lot of people, it's a hard case to make. But then it's like, well, you know, are you bothered by the fact that what's the amount of money sitting in your savings account doesn't buy you as much groceries anymore as it used to? It's like, what's going on there? So you start with small examples, and like, well, who creates the money? How does money come into existence? Most people live their whole lives into adulthood and have never thought to question where does money actually come from? What does it mean? What does it mean? You know, they may have heard about like, oh yeah, the pioneers or the original Puritans like bought Manhattan Island for, you know, some amount of wampum that the Indians like, you know, seashells or something that they were using at the time, and that was like kind of a sneaky thing to do. It's probably about the end of their what money is education, but you know the but you start like questioning these things. You say, okay, well that's great and cool, but you know the existing system still works. Well, why is there Noster? Noster exists because you know social media is centralized and controlled, and you know you might find yourself on the other side of the fence, like you're kicked off of a platform. Like maybe you spend your whole you know last 10 years building up a following, and suddenly like your life's energy is like ripped away from you because like now you can't like you got kicked off the platform, YouTube, Rumble, whatever it is, and now you don't have that connection to your following anymore, and you're going to have some serious economic consequence from that. um, so maybe it makes sense to use and build that following, that social media sort of like tempo on a system where it can't be you know closed off to you, can't be attacked in a meaningful way. So without getting into the particulars of Nostr, that's what that was. It was an effort to like set up a system that's an alternate system that has the properties that you want, but yet also has the properties of not being able to be attacked in the same way. So you can then take the next, if you can make those two arguments, then you can make the next argument, which is like, okay, what is Spaces Protocol trying to do? Well, it's trying to say, look, your name and things named in language have value. And, you know, just like your name, Jason, my name, Andrew, and our proper last names and stuff, in a way, we don't want our name to be like sullied. We don't want it to be misused. You know, there's this whole thing called libel law, which is like if somebody goes out in the media and trashes you, well, you have some defense against that. You know, it's like your name, your reputation, your property are important things that you should have some sovereign control over. And that's where Spaces Protocol and other efforts before it, you know, try to establish like, look, how do you give someone control over a name such that they have like sovereign, you know, way to exert it and control it in a sovereign way that no other entity, no other permission was having to be granted, no other nation said it was okay, and there's no way to remove that you know that permission, that right. And when you again when you look into the DNS system, you're like most people just take it for granted, but they don't understand where it comes from. They don't dive into the details. And so I'll show my screen here. This is just an X post. I came across it earlier today, and it's really not about anything I particularly care about. But the point of it that kind of caught my attention was this. So I was looking at some other stuff on Telegram, and then this was linked to it. So I brought it up. So there's this Nox, it's some sort of decentralized, you know, Ethereum coin exchange. Evidently, recently, they've had some problems with their sites because if you look at this, they say that they have that they've had their domains taken down. You know, well, what does that mean? It says our registrar has apparently resold them or taken them over. Well, wait a second. Like when I go to my GoDaddy account, I see all my domains in there. Don't I own them? It's like, well, you're kind of renting them. If you really want to be honest about it, you're renting them every year. Don't you get a renewal notice every year? I know I do. I'm getting tired of paying for a lot of these domain names that I bought years ago, and like now they're costing me like 25 to 40 bucks a year to renew that I'll never probably ever use. So I'm actually trying to like cull them down. But anyway, it's like, how does this happen? It says we are not in control of the original domains anymore. So something with this company, maybe they did something that offended somebody. Maybe they're making money where somebody else doesn't like it. I don't know, but I was reading a little further, and it's kind of interesting. The only interface currently one is hosted on ENS. Well, ENS is Ethereum name service, and it's a naming service just like Spaces Protocol is, but it lives in the Ethereum domain, so it lives on Ethereum chain. Now, again, you're like, well, why build a new thing when something completely viable already exists? Well, that gets into like understanding why Ethereum based blockchains have inherent issues of centralization. A lot of these projects have central owners. They have companies that are behind them. There was initial token issuance that went to a lot of the insiders. I mean, there's a lot of technical value in what the Ethereum blockchains have produced, and a lot of what Bitcoin has inherited. A lot of the technology, zero knowledge proofs that Spaces uses, came out of the Ethereum ecosystem.
Like a
So we can't you know, you have to come to your own decision about where the value was and why is one is better than the other. But given that, and honestly, when I first heard about this Ethereum name service and a kind of a related thing called unstoppable domains, I was like, this is so cool. I really like the idea that you could have a website that no one can take down. Just the idea that there is a way to put up web content that no one can take down is pretty powerful idea. And when I looked into it and bought a name and set up a site, it's like, okay, I get it, but it's not always predictable. The browsers don't support it. So you get things like this in this thread where you have to like go to other places that have taken the .eth and mapped it into the normal DNS. So, well, as soon as you do this, you're back to relying on DNS again. So it's not a pure solution. And they go on to explain that things are still down, and maybe it's Cloudflare kind of interfered with them, maybe not. I don't know. I didn't get into the details, but the point that I wanted to bring up is that here is an example just occurred in the last few days where some their domain name was ripped away from them. Their property rights for that name were, you could say, violated. So what do? They're scrambling to sort of get their system back up and make it available for their users. Now, whether you like their service or not, different question. It's kind of like free speech. It's like you're either for free speech or you're not. And to have this kind of, well, I'm for free speech except for this thing and that thing and the other thing. I don't like those things. So free speech is everything but these other things. No, it's not how
hate
it works.
speech.
And this is kind of where the whole, the whole BIP-110 comes back in. It's like, hey, well, I don't like spam. I don't like extra data, but except for this or except for that. And, the fact that, the biggest voice and proponent of the BIP-110 is also a person who founded a project that uses the Bitcoin blockchain for non-monetary purposes is kind of ironic. But anyway, I'll probably post this on the Spaces Telegram later, just as something to for people to kind of be aware of. But it's it's a real thing. It has happened. We can only expect it will happen again. Maybe X is more, like as an example, is more permissive, but it's centralized. So even if you like Elon Musk and you think he kind of has the same values as you do, well, there may be a day when he changes his mind and is different, and then suddenly your voice isn't heard on X anymore. So I think it's important to build these parallel systems that aren't subject to the same vulnerabilities as the existing systems, even when the existing systems still work fine. So this is why I spend time and effort with with Spaces protocol. So
Right. Not your keys, not your name.
that's
Bitcoin
right.
only.
That's right. So anyway, what else do we want to talk about today? We got
All
about
right.
10 minutes, I think.
Yeah, so we could talk about South Korea. Want to talk about South Korea?
Sure.
So South Korea is updating their laws to officially recognize Bitcoin as a type of national asset. So they're mainly updating their internal government rules for managing Bitcoin. And this is a huge step for Bitcoin. You know, all these countries coming around, they're not just ignoring it. They're saying, hey, this stuff's real. We're gathering this stuff. We're stealing this stuff from our citizens. You know, it's coming in. How do we handle it? When we have it, what do we do with it? So South Korea coming up with some laws, updating their laws on how, when they steal Bitcoin from their citizens, what exactly should they do with it?
Yeah, it's you know, it's maybe not something that's going in the direction we would like to see, right? But on the other hand, it's like, what is it telling us? It's telling us that sovereign nations, governments are taking this seriously. And it's not just something that they feel they can just ignore and it'll go away. I think there was a time when that was kind of the major sentiment. So we're seeing things now that are more indicative that Bitcoin just, it can't go away. There's no, I mean, what would it take to extract Bitcoin from all the places it's kind of wound its way into now? I mean, it, maybe there was a time when you could kind of visualize, oh, well, okay, somebody bought a pizza for it, but that's it. We're going to shut it down, make it illegal. Nobody can do it anymore. Mount Gox happened. Everybody lost. See, it's crazy. We got to just shut it all down globally. And that would have been like killing it in the cradle, right? It's like it's gone, and it would take a lot to come back. We'll pass laws. You can't write software that combines this set of cryptographic sort of routines. That's going to be illegal around the world, and we'll throw you in jail if you do it. I mean, that could have been what happened, but it didn't. The governments chose to kind of ignore it or not think of it as a threat. Or when it became a little more, then they tried to maybe just use market forces to kind of squelch it. Like, oh, we'll make it. Maybe we can kind of manipulate the market with derivatives and we'll make it crash and everybody will lose interest and then it won't be a problem anymore. Well, maybe that's some of why we see what we see in the price action.
Yeah.
Who knows? So, but I think it's evidence that, governments, sovereign governments and central banks are taking notice. And, the European Central Bank not long ago didn't consider gold as a base level monetary asset in their own accounting infrastructure. And it was only recently that they kind of put it back on the list of like, oh, we consider this like, solid money, solid value store. And it was just kind of a quiet thing, but it's kind of a signal of recognition that this type of money is really worth something. So when we see stuff like this in South Korea, it's like, while it may not kind of go in our direction the way we want, it's actually is taken seriously. In Germany, I think you can, if you hold Bitcoin for 5 years plus, then it's free of capital gains. And I saw in the UK, they just changed the rule for how they account the capital gains calculation for Bitcoin. It's like you don't have to realize it in ways that you were supposed to before. So they've kind of laxed it up. Again, maybe it's not the best ruling, but it's like the tax authority had to address it.
Yeah.
It's not like it could go away. It's not like, oh, we'll just ignore this and we won't have to deal with it. No. Within the US IRS, like exchanges this last tax period had to issue 1099 DAs, which means if you had like a Coinbase or Kraken account or whatever, and had a crypto balance in it, they sent a copy or report of that to the IRS. So if you didn't like claim it on your tax the way you were supposed to, then the IRS has a record of it, and they could say, hey, we know you had X amount of crypto, where's the accounting for it in
Yeah.
your tax return? We don't see it. So something's going on here. Um, so, and from what I understand, uh, the IRS, we don't hear about this much, but was kind of overwhelmed with the number of reports that they got issued. And most of them were showing like gains of like less than 50 cents or something like that. So a huge amount of paperwork that went to the IRS, and now that they wanted it, and now they have to deal with it. So there's a lot going on. Another thing I would cite is just that um, the the I guess it's the Stable Act is going through Congress now, and they're fighting over whether deposits should have interest, and whether stablecoin things can be considered this way or that way. The banks have a big uh, objection to a lot of it. They're trying to wheedle in other things. I won't get into the particulars today, but it's like the fact that there is a law moving through Congress that is, Trump wants to get it done this year. I don't know if it's going to happen, but it'll for sure get picked up next time, and more discussion, more debate will happen, uh, which is again just validating that our government has to take this stuff seriously. You can't just ignore it. Um, so in my mind, that's like more of a general statement that the this stuff is real. It's not going away. That doesn't mean that the price can't go down. It just means that there's no like unwinding it from the financial fabric of our collective societies. So yeah, it's going to be around. So which means that things that are built on it can can have that assurance that the blockchain will persist. Yeah, maybe the hash rate drops in half. That doesn't mean it goes to zero. So, you know,
Right.
we keep hearing about Bitcoin miners are like shifting all their infrastructure over to like AI use. Like, oh well, what if there's no more Bitcoin miners? Well, the protocol adjusts for that. It's like adjusted this whole time. So it's like, you know, Satoshi and whoever was helping kind of put these things together really put together something pretty magical that is, has weathered a lot of storm, and I'm sure will be more challenges going into the future.
Right. Bitcoin exists. It's here. It's here to
Yeah.
stay. So as more of these governments come around, they recognize it, they create these rules for it. Could have a positive effect, could have a negative effect. Positive, people could say, okay, it's legitimate. Now I feel comfortable in doing it. Could have a negative effect because it could be too overbearing, all these laws and all these rules, which then in turn would actually have a positive effect because then people would just use Bitcoin directly. All these rules you're putting on me, well, are those rules in the protocol or are they just some human laws that we created? There's a lot of
Hmm.
things that you could do, and humans create all these laws for, jaywalking is a common example. Oh, you can't cross the street here. You got to walk to the corner. That's illegal, right? But who does that, right? We just cross the street when we cross the street. So there's a lot of good things about Bitcoin. It opens up freedom for a lot of people. And like you said, it stays around. It becomes an anchor for useful things. You can put things
Yeah,
on Bitcoin and you can expect it to stay around for a long time.
that's right. That's right. Yeah. Uh, you're walking the street permission kind of example. It reminded me of, if you take the time, and I recommend anyone who is inclined to read the whole book, Jason Lowry's Software, uh, at towards the end, probably about 90% of the way through, he talks about, you know, the rules of nature and of energy, and that Bitcoin is the only thing that really converts something in the physical world into something that's irrefutably digital and can't be mucked with. And he goes on to explain that really everything else, everything outside of the physical world that we think of, is an abstraction. It's all rules, like our politics, our governments, our ethics, our rules. I mean, these are all just abstractions that we agree to. It's like there's nothing that, if it's not bound by physics or energy, it's some level of abstraction. Now we might agree to live by it, like this is the agreement to participate in the society that we have. We agree that there's these things called judges that are going to like say things about something that we're going to agree to abide by. But at the end of the day, that's all abstraction. The fact that, like you're supposed to like cross the street at the corner and not in the middle of the block, and is like, that's an abstraction. It's like, so it's like, when you really think about it in that term, you're like, yeah, that's kind of right. It's like we live in this kind of like world of like broad abstractions. So anyway, I know we're kind of running up on our time today, and I was kind of prepared to talk about some more get into the weeds of Spaces protocol and how the cert relays work. But you know what? I'm going to leave it as a teaser for next time. And if you can't wait to like find out what next week's gonna get into, then I'll just say, don't be afraid to, if you're interested in Spaces protocol, go to the GitHub website, clone some of the parts of the project, and just don't be afraid to open up AI. I use Cursor as my framework, but you don't even have to do that. Just like use Claude, use ChatGPT, whatever you like to use. And don't be afraid to, like, if you have a question about, well, how does this exactly work? Just ask the AI to like, with that question to see what it says. And I find it's like sometimes better than the documentation. So that's my little teaser for next time. We can get into it more if there isn't more pressing news that comes up. But yeah, I think it's exciting, and we're build in the downtime, right? That's what they always say.
100%. Yeah. So it was great talk. Good talking with you, Andrew. Thanks for watching, everybody.
All right, take care, everyone.